Hello and welcome back to the reading of The Puzzle, A Gift from Spirit with Kelly Allen. And today I'm going to be covering two chapters from the book. The first is Encounter with a Preacher, and the second is Embrace the Silence. So, as always, I'll start with a quote and I'll just go ahead and jump right in. Never be bullied into silence. Never allow yourself to be made a victim. Accept no one's definition of your life. Define yourself. Harvey Fierstein. Encounter with a Preacher, coming full circle. In keeping with the subject matter from the last chapter, I have another very similar story that I feel inspired to share. One afternoon, years after having left the fundamentalist church that I once belonged to, I happened upon a gentleman preaching on the streets, as I had once done. I immediately felt compelled to first listen and then to engage in conversation with this preacher. Having been in the shoes this gentleman was now in, and remembering how certain I was that I had a cornerstone on understanding the, quote, truth, perhaps I should have silently blessed this individual and gone on my way. As the preacher shouted about the fires of hell and the eternal destiny of torment we all face without repentance, I could sense the urgency in his voice, which I interpreted as a true concern for those of us with whom he spoke. Something overcame me, and I was compelled to engage him in conversation about the very subject he presented so passionately: hell. I began the conversation by asking this gentleman if he had children, to which he responded, yes. I asked him if his children had ever been disobedient, to which he again responded, yes. At this point, I asked him if he had ever had to punish his children, to which again he responded, yes. I then asked him if he had ever or ever would discipline his children by holding their hand over the burner of the stove in his kitchen. He became noticeably irritated by this and retorted, no, of course not. That would be child abuse. I then went on to ask if it were possible for his children to suffer the pain of the stove burner for eternity. Would he subject them to this punishment forever for being disobedient to him? At this point, he could tell where I was going with the conversation, and he became extremely angry. His face became beet red, and the veins began to show on his forehead as he began to scream at me and rebuke me, calling me the devil and a liar. He even shouted the words, "Get thee behind me, Satan." I probably should have let the conversation end at this point, but I was driven to get an answer from him. I apologized for having upset him, and I reminded him that I just wanted to have a calm conversation, and I assured him that my intent was not to anger or upset him, but to have a serious discussion. I then asked him again if he would ever consider subjecting his children to eternal suffering by placing their hand on the stove burner for their disobedience to him. At this point, this preacher tried to avoid the question by discussing the importance of discipline for the overall well-being of the children, and elaborated on the concept, at which point I once again asked him if he would ever, if it were possible, subject his children to eternal suffering as punishment. He finally relented and admitted that he would never do such a thing. I then asked him the same question I had posed in my letter to the editor of the Eureka Springs newspaper in the last chapter. I said, do you believe it could be possible for God to create you with the ability to have an even greater capacity for compassion and love than God himself? It was now apparent that this poor preacher felt he was under attack, which was definitely not my intent, and he returned to rebuking me and screaming at me, once again accusing me of being filled with the devil. I only share this story because I believe that as sparks of the divine, we must realize that all ability and capacity in us to demonstrate compassion, understanding, and love can only come from Spirit, Source, or God. We are blessed with the ability to know God through knowing ourselves intuitively. Even the scriptures teach us that God is not the author of fear. When we have fear as a motivator, we are driven by a dictatorship, and our actions take place with obligation and emptiness. However, when we're motivated by love, our actions are filled with compassion, understanding, and joy. I hope at some point in the conversation a seed was planted for this preacher, and he's been able to eventually move to a greater understanding of the love of Spirit, a love of God, and the love that God provides. I choose to believe he was sincere in his concern for the eternal destiny from which he believed he was commissioned to save the world. I also believe he was working on a portion of the puzzle that I had been lucky enough to have completed. One day in the future, I hope he and I encounter one another again. I have the feeling I'll need his assistance as I continue to work on the puzzle too. And now I'll continue on with the reading of the next chapter, titled Embrace the Silence, but again starting with a couple of quotes. You can hear the footsteps of God when silence reigns in the mind. Sri Satya Sai Baba. Learn to get in touch with the silence within yourself and know that everything in life has purpose. There are no mistakes, no coincidences. All events are blessings given to us to learn from. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Embrace the silence. Don't fear the silence that brings with it rest, contemplation, reflection, and peace. There are a number of ways and reasons the universe may deliver quiet times to you. You may find yourself in a position of being laid off from employment, iced into your house without power, and without the distraction of radio or TV, stuck in a hotel with terrible cell phone, internet, and television reception, or any other situation that finds you with yourself and a deafening silence. Take advantage of these moments and listen, truly listen to what your spirit has to say. All too often, this silence becomes a time of frustration for us, in which we feel antsy and unproductive. We begin to feel as if and believe that things are going wrong. Rather than recognize the opportunity being presented to us to take a break from our stress-driven lives, we look to fill the quiet, even if just with our own complaints and murmurings. In reality, the universe may be setting the stage for us to enjoy self-reflection and allowing us to, quote, face our demons and examine the scars of our past. The fear of this pain can cause us to retreat back into unhappiness through self-sabotage, self-defeat, or depression, when we could allow the fear and the pain to motivate us towards a higher realization of ourself. Experiencing feelings of depression, anxiety, stress, and other negative emotions during contemplation only serves to alert us that we have become misaligned in spirit, and this should drive us to reassess our perspectives and count our blessings. As mentioned in the What is True Success chapter, often in life we become more focused on the material manifestations of our successes. We tend to neglect the non-material, such as time together with loved ones, good conversations, relaxing by a fire, watching the rain fall, taking a walk in the woods, or any other act that leads us to greater communion with nature and with one another. There is so much beauty in nature, art, music, and theater, and there is a myriad of opportunities for us to experience joy. When society or our ego tells us that we don't have a large enough house, the correct number of cars, recreation vehicles, etc., or we haven't put in enough hours at the office, or we aren't working hard enough, these quiet times magically appear to remind us that we never signed up a contract enslaving us to the expectations of society, but we came into this world to gain a better understanding of our connection to God and to experience pure joy. We may be introduced to quiet times to reflect on our spiritual journey or our connection to mankind, to rediscover our passion, to reflect on our blessings with gratitude, to recharge our batteries, to cry past a hurt and feel the loving embrace of Spirit, or to fulfill some other need. What it comes down to is that Spirit has on some higher level made an agreement to deliver time for us to be and to be loved. We participate in the arrangement, whether consciously or in spirit, and we can't let the opportunity pass us without taking full advantage of it. We are here for a higher purpose than to collect possessions, and each of us has a unique reason for being here. Oftentimes, it's these quiet times that completely shift our paradigm or change the course of our direction the direction that we're currently taking. Doors of amazing possibilities can be opened to us to allow us to pursue the reason we've arrived on this planet. When the opportunity for peace and quiet presents itself, don't seek out something to fill the gap, but embrace the gift and know that Spirit is also there waiting to flood your heart and your being with inspiration. Then we can fully claim and embrace our inheritance as the child of God. Again, thank you so much for joining me for this continued reading of the puzzle, A Gift from Spirit. And I'll be coming back again soon with another chapter or two. And like I've mentioned before, I truly hope that this is resonating with you and you're enjoying it. And in some way it's helping to bless your life, just like the realizations when they came to me have and continue to bless my life.